In many different messages from Saint Michael to Luz de Maria Bonilla, we have heard that we are going to be losing a lot of our modern conveniences, some of the technology we have gotten used to. Saint Michael has even said the word, we will go back to rudimentary living. So how do we turn that prophetic word, those messages from heaven, into an action plan to get our families and ourselves ready for those times ahead? Well, in this video, I'm going to tell you just a couple of ways that my family has been trying to get used to some of these simpler ways of living, some of these ways that our grandparents and great-grandparents lived on a daily basis, and they are not too far from us, not so alien from us that we can implement them into our daily lives today. So one of the first things that my family did to kind of get out of the normal way of life in society and kind of go back to a more simplified way of living is homeschooling our kids. We have been homeschooling for about 5 years now, and we are so blessed to see just the relationships in our family that have grown and the relationship that we get to cultivate for our children, with our children, toward the Lord. So that has been a huge way that we were kind of stepping out of anything we knew, and we were just kind of following God's lead. He showed us many different reasons why we needed to step away from, the brick and mortar school and bring our kids home. And just in the last few years, we've seen not only just the chaos of what's going on in schools with, these medical issues that have popped up over the last few years, but also we're learning, what's being taught in schools, what they're suggesting to be taught in schools, and we just feel very blessed that we were already removed from that. We didn't have to deal with any of that stuff, and our kids haven't had to deal with any of that stuff. When schools were shut down, the last few years, my kids didn't feel any of those pains, thanks be to God, because we had already changed this lifestyle. We were already, going into nature on a regular basis and going for hikes and things like that. We removed ourselves from, all the take your kids to go do something like, arcades and trampoline parks and things like that. We just had slowly stepped away from those things because as, your family grows, it gets kind of costly, and it's busy, and we were just trying to get back into nature where God was leading us. So we had already entered that way of life when all this craziness hit. So again, thanks be to God, my kids didn't feel the effects so much. So the next step for me personally with the homeschooling will be removing the conveniences of buying notebooks. The curriculum companies have made it very easy for you to just buy a workbook for each kid every year as they advance. So you're not printing things out. So it's all in a nice, easy place to just flip open. But personally for me, I'm feeling like if things really do go the way that... Okay. What happened?
We kicked it off of my bed.
Oh, great. So it's not working. Oh, there.
Oh.
There you go. There you go. Can you pick it up and walk it to the other room?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So I'm sorry. I was saying that it's extremely easy to homeschool today because the curriculum choices, there are just so many of them. They really make it very easy, the curriculum companies, to just flip open a notebook and there's the lesson. They script it out for you, everything. I mean, anybody can do it. If I can do it, I promise you, you can do it. You do not need any sort of fancy degree or certification. Really, some amazing people have already done that the hard work in putting these curriculums together, and you get to relearn these things with your children. You get to, oh, let me help you. You get to take back your education the way you wanted to with your family. So that's the beautiful thing about homeschooling. But like I was saying, for me personally, my next goal is, okay, well, if I'm not gonna be able to order new books next year because X, Y, Z, how would I continue to homeschool my children, continue teaching them without the conveniences of these printed out nice workbooks? So that's something to think of. If you're already homeschooling, what do you already have that you could continue with? What core books do you have? How would you implement them moving forward? Another thing with my kids, we have tried our hardest over the years to minimize any technology. We've gotten rid of cable. We do have a streaming service, and we every now and then, have movie night, and they watch a little bit of TV here and there through the streaming service. Like right now, one of my kids is watching something, so she sits still so I can actually record. But that is something that we've tried to really pull away from, and that's the opposite of what people are doing. When we used to go to restaurants, I see people, in their little kids and the tablets and stuff, and the kids would sit really nice the whole time they were at the restaurants, and my kids wouldn't, because they're, running around, jumping around because they don't have a screen. So, whatever, I'd rather have these active kids than kids that only know how to behave when a screen's in front of them. So that's the give and take. We've had family members give screens for different holidays and stuff, and so my kids are not completely without, but we strictly limit their time that they're allowed on it and what they're allowed to do on it. So we do things like puzzles and board games. I've gone to lots of thrift stores and gotten them, and then board games and books and puzzles, and they're very, very cheap, going to a thrift store and stocking up on those things, so that there are different ways for the kids to, expand their minds. Okay, I don't know where it is. Oh, okay, 1 minute. I get it for you 1 minute. Go sit. I'll get it for you 1 minute. Let's see. So we have, family reading on a regular basis. We read in the evenings together. That is kind of our bonding time. That is the time we have to chat with each other. Okay, sorry, kids interrupted. So let me get back to where I was. Moving on to preserving food. So the last few years I have gotten into canning. That's something that God was leading me to. I can tell you when and where I was gifted with some wonderful homemaking gifts to preserve your meat and make pasta and can and things like that many years ago. And I was young and I didn't want anything to do with it. I was starting to have a bunch of babies and I just didn't think I had time. Well, now I have 6 kids and somehow I'm finding time, because you find the time for things that are necessary that you want to do, right? So I have found it necessary recently. So if you are at the store and you see the cans on the shelves, the canning cans on the shelf, buy them, because they are very hard to come by. Once the stores get stocked with them, they quickly sell out, and then they're out for a while until finally they're stocked again. They sell out quickly. So people are making sure to stock up on the cans, because they're preparing. So you can prepare also. You don't have to just can things with a pressure canner. That is obviously a great way to do it, but you can also water bath can, which is just basically almost like a double broiler system. You put the can in some water in a pot and heat it up to a certain degree to preserve the food. You can do things like dehydrating foods or rice, beans, dry goods put into cans, so that way bugs and mice will not get at them, so you have them on the shelves for a longer period of time. So those are some of the ways that I am using canning and cans. I have been dehydrating quite a few things. My husband loves to make the beef jerky on the dehydrator. Something I wish I would have known many years ago is that you can put things like onions, peppers, carrots, celery, tomatoes on a dehydrator, dry them out, put them in a container, an airtight container. Sorry. Put them in an airtight container, and then when you're ready to use them again, you just reconstitute them with water or in a soup, or some of the tomatoes that I dehydrated this year. I can't wait to put into some olive oil and make some sun-dried tomato dishes with it. You're silly. This is it. This is how I get things done. Be it me recording a video or going to the grocery store. Okay. All right. So, I've also dehydrated things like herbs, because you want to preserve them dried for, so they don't get moldy or things like that. So a dehydrator is relatively cheap. You can do so much with it. So that's one thing to think about. Another thing that we've been doing is gardening. Each year we've been growing a bigger garden. I have a black thumb, unfortunately, so it's a real struggle for me, but maybe you'll have more success. It doesn't matter though, because I'm going to keep trying and learning and growing what I can, because we gotta learn. I gotta figure it out. So the kids have gotten involved, which has been really great, a really great learning experience for them, getting out into nature. And seeing what comes out of the garden and onto our plates have been wonderful. This winter we actually brought in this fall I guess, we brought in a bunch of the plants that we had growing outside for several different reasons. One is because I wanted to see if we could grow things inside. We bought some, big lights to hang. You can kind of see over here, the bright light back here. That's where my plants are. So we brought in some pepper plants, some tomato plants, some herbs, some of our little citrus trees, things like that couldn't stay outside. We wanted to see what would actually grow inside. So our herbs are doing good. Peppers did good for a little while, but we had some issues, so we're learning, But the good thing is when spring comes again, we'll be able to put some of those plants outside, and they will just start growing immediately the fruit, the vegetable, instead of having to shoot up and establish itself completely. So we'll be a few weeks ahead of the game with some of these plants. So again, it's an experiment, and we're just trying to see what we can get accomplished, what we can do better this year than we did last year. So another thing we've been working on is getting our knowledge up for natural remedies. So I know that in a lot of apparitions, Jesus, St. Michael, our Holy Mother, has given recommendations on many different herbs to use, different plants to use for different plagues that will be heading our way or have headed our way. But to learn what else to do with those plants, how to actually utilize them, and what else God has given us that we may have forgotten has been something that's been close to my heart. So I've been trying to learn a lot of those things for quite a while now, actually. Again, another thing that God kind of told me to do a while back, and I slowly started to do, but once I realized a lot of things we've all learned the last few years, I've really ramped up my education in the aspect of herbal medicine, apothecary, all those things. So, little shameless plug here. I've also started an Etsy store to sell some of these items that God has showed me how to use, what they're good for, and so I've, wanted to share that knowledge and get some of these things out to people who maybe don't have the same knowledge or don't have the same, call on their heart to share these things. So check out my Etsy store. So check out that link below if you need to buy some Good Samaritan oil or some other natural remedies that I have on that site. And part of this education with the herbs and such, I have been learning to forage for things in nature that God has given us. And I have also included the kids with that, and that's been kind of fun. We found, where there's chestnut trees and walnut trees in our local area, how to identify them and how to actually husk them, which is kind of a another learning curve. It's very messy to clean walnuts, so that was fun experience. We've gone violet hunting and dandelion hunting and plantain hunting. We found some hawthorn, found lots of different things in our local area we would have never really cared to look for a few years back. And again, God has been giving revelation of why these things are growing near us, how to use them. So thanks be to God, we've been taking advantage of that. So find out what is in your local area, find out what is growing around your house, what's growing in the local parks around you. So, if things, worst comes to worst, like for instance, the walnut tree is not near my house, but it's at one of the parks we play at. It's at one of the offices we visit regularly. And then we found out that there are some near one of the churches we go to. So that's pretty cool, to kind of open our eyes to, okay, where would we go if we were in a tough spot? We also found a nut that I did collect and research when I got home and learned, no, don't eat those. So, make sure you research everything, because there are some good and some bad, and only the animals really know until we look it up on Google, right? Another way that we have been trying to make sure that our food source is filled in all sorts of varieties is we have started to raise quail. So we, at this point in time, live in an area where we can't have chickens, we can't have any farm animals, but quail are not farm animals. So they are not livestock. They are very quiet, they're small, and they don't need a lot of room, and they grow very quickly. They grow quick, they produce eggs very quick, 8 to 12 weeks, depending on the type of quail you get. You can harvest them, or they will start laying eggs for you, where a chicken can take about 6 months. So there's a big difference there, obviously. So the quail is one of the ways that we are starting, that's a new thing we just started a few months ago. They're just about the age of maturity where maybe they will start to produce eggs. And that is been another adventure for the kids to learn. So think about what you could grow, or what you can raise. Rabbits are another quiet animal that don't need a lot of room, and the turnaround is very quick from what I hear. Chickens, quail, what else could you possibly do to raise an animal that would help you with your food source? So something to think about. Also, if you are a hunter or if you've never hunted, something to think about is that in the prophecies to John Leary, God has mentioned that deer will come into the areas that the refuges are when that time comes. So you won't have to hunt them. They'll just come and lie down and die. But you will have to obviously learn how to harvest them, how to skin them, how to take the meat out in a way that won't damage, if you puncture an organ, it will damage the meat. So that is a skill that if you don't have, but maybe you're interested in learning, could be very helpful when things go sour, or in the time of the refuges, you could be an asset to the community you're in. Another thing that we have been focused on more these last few years is preserving water. God has said in many of his prophecies, make sure you have a preserve of water. So we have some water barrels outside that collect rainwater. We have some tablets that will clean the water. And we also have some I buy, when we go to the grocery store, I buy a pallet of jugs of water or bottled water, and we store them. So another thing that I recently learned, which is amazing, the moringa, if you know that, that tree that was from, I think it was Jesus said to use in one of the prophecies to Luz de Maria Bonilla, the seeds of the moringa tree are a natural water purifier. So if you're in a place where you can grow a moringa tree, they can't be in anywhere that there is any area that's freezing, and they really need to be in like 80 degrees or higher temperature on a regular basis. So not a lot of places in America. But if you are in one of those places, that would be a great thing to get into, is to grow moringa and collect the seeds, because that would be really beneficial to a community that needs fresh water, right? All right, well, something else that we have been focusing on is reducing, reusing, and recycling. I know that has been a popular saying for the last decade or so, but how much have you really paid attention to it? Anyone that has lived through dealing with a loss of a job, or even something as severe as the Depression, if you have a parent that lived through the Depression, you know that they really were making sure that nothing got wasted. And unfortunately, as time goes on, as we live through good times, we forget how important that is. Well, it's time to start realizing, if you haven't already, how important it is to reduce your waste, reuse what you can, and recycle what you can. So some of the ways that we have been doing that is, first of all, just respecting what God has given us, not wasting food. That's one of the big things in this household. I tell my children, someone else will eat it. We have 8 mouths to feed and 3 dogs and some quail now. Someone will eat it. Don't waste it.
I found it in the soil.
Okay.
I found it in Mr. Google.
Oh, okay. Running water, is something that we are so accustomed to, and we forget that other parts of the world don't have it still to this day. So that's something else that I always tell my children, and I remind myself that it is so easy to turn on a faucet, and one day we might have to live through not having that convenience. So I thank God for it today, and I make sure to turn off the faucet, not just leave it running. So just having that mindset, I think you respect nature more, you respect these little conveniences, I'm sure you always got yelled at to turn off the light when you leave the room, things like that. Are we teaching our children and our grandchildren now that these are conveniences, these are gifts, and to respect them? We also have been reusing things, recycling things like old t-shirts instead of or clothing that's been ripped or things like that, sheets, blankets, whatever. I've been trying to find different ways to use them again. So we've been, doing the old cut it up and use it as a rag, or, what can we patch? What can we sew up? Things like that. Just again, trying to just respect what God has given us as a gift, and not be of the consumerism mindset of, oh, it's broken, oh, it has a rip, let's throw it out and go buy a new one. Just trying to find that respectful relationship again, I think is a great thing to teach our children and to remind ourselves as well. So we're also hearing that there will be some fertilizer shortages. I keep hearing that within the gardening community and such. Farmers are worried about this. So something that I'm trying to do to try and do my part of reduce, reuse, plan ahead. I have been keeping my eggshells when we eat eggs, and bones when we make chicken. And what my plan is, you dry out you wash the eggs, you dry them out, and they can be used as a fertilizer. I'm sorry, they not technically a fertilizer, but they give nutrition back to the soil, but they can also be used as a mulch. So they do like a double duty job there. And then another thing is when we have eaten chicken with bone in, I have been doing several things with that. First of all, I'm making bone broth. So I am putting the chicken carcass, all the bones, in the slow cooker, making bone broth. I can that, so now that's on the shelf. And then the bones I'm drying out in the dehydrator, boiling them down, then I dry them out, and then I mash them, food process them, whatever you want to say, however you want to do it. I have a few different ways that I've done it, trying to figure out what's easier. But the bones turn into bone meal, which is a great nutrient for your plants. So those are just a few ways that I'm planning for my next season of growing, and what some of the issues that are being rumored to lie ahead are, how I'm going to battle them, I guess. And lastly, with our reducing our waste consumption, is we have been composting all the kitchen scraps that we can, and then in turn that will also help our garden in the future. So that's one of the things I've heard a lot when I hear people that are talking about, worst case scenarios, the issue of garbage and human waste. I guess all human waste, if you want to put it that way. Those seem to be the biggest issues. Obviously, you can have a lot of illness if you don't do those things correctly and in a safe manner. Last thing I want to mention here is just for you to start thinking about, what skills do you have? What tools have you learned to use in the past that maybe you aren't now? Think about those things. What could you pick up again and help the community, your family, yourself in a time of crisis? Maybe you know how to build things. A lot of people haven't learned those skills. Maybe you know how to sew. Maybe you can cut hair. I know when everything shut down a few years ago, I had to learn to cut my boy's hair, in the house. I had a pair of dog clippers, and which is the same thing as human clippers. They just market it differently. And we learned how to cut 4 boys' hair, 4 boys' heads of hair. And, trial and error, but now I don't go to get their hair done, except every now and then when my husband wants to take them, on a boy date or something, But that saves us a lot of money, It's a lot of kids' heads, right? But then from that, I learned how to cut my hair and my daughter's hair. So that really is a skill that not everybody is willing to learn. Not everybody knows how to do. So that is something that you maybe could think about. Again, producing animals. You have animals. How could you supply the community in the future if they needed you to? Garden, what about your garden? If you're already doing the garden, could you up your grow amount this year to help your community if things get bad? And preserving would go along with that. Whatever you're preserving, could you help the community if they needed it? How about cooking over a fire? Have you ever cooked over a fire outside? That again there's a learning curve. So have you done it? Maybe do it as a fun family activity just to learn, trial and error before the stress of really needing to know how to do it happens. What about cooking in general? Do you know how to bake your own bread? Do you know how to make tortillas? Things that we buy in a package now when we can't go to the store and buy it in a package. Do you know how to make it at home? Do you have the ingredients? How about going camping? Have you yourself gone camping? Have you taken your family? Have you tried that out to see what it's like without all the luxuries, just to get used to it? If you make it into a fun thing, then maybe it won't be so stressful if it really is something you have to experience. And if you do have this kind of gear, hunting gear, gardening, sewing, tools, things like that. Have you taken the gear out? Have you taken your tools out? What do you have? Are you missing? Things like that. Take account of what you need to get to fill in your tool belt or whatever it is. And lastly, I would say start learning people around you that have these skills, making friends with them. Learn who's in your community. Go to the local farmers markets. Learn who sells a meat in your community. Not going to a grocery store, going to a local farmer. Is there a farmer that sells eggs? Is there a farmer that sells milk? Things like that. Who is in your community that can be an asset to you and your family? So I hope these were just some things that got your mind going and gives you some inspiration to be prepared, never living in fear, living in trust, and being prepared for what God has warned us about, God has told us to get ready for. And if you have any suggestions, any helpful comments, please leave them below. Let's be help of Christians together and give each other inspiration and ideas on how to make a bad situation turn out to be a good, positive one as a community.